their hand and shake their hand and give them a big hug, and he would kiss them. And with all of this backslapping that Absalom did, 2 Samuel 15:6 says he stole the hearts of the men of Israel. And after a long time of doing this, finally Absalom, he led a revolt against his father, King David. But then in 2 Samuel 15 verses 12 through 17, while Absalom was offering sacrifices, he also sent for Ahithophel the Gilonite, David's counselor, to come from Gilead, his hometown. And so the conspiracy gained strength, and Absalom's following kept on increasing. And a messenger came and told David. He said, the hearts of the people of Israel are with Absalom. And then David said to all of his officials who were with him in Jerusalem, come, we must flee, or none of us will escape from Absalom. David, he wasn't fleeing because he was afraid of Absalom. But David knew that if he stayed in Israel, that Absalom and all those men would come and attack Israel, and it would wreak havoc and destruction on Jerusalem. But then he said again, he said, we must leave immediately, or he will move quickly to overtake us and bring ruin on us and put the city to the sword. The king's officials answered him, your servants are ready to do whatever our lord the king chooses. And the king set out with his entire household following him, but he left 10 concubines to take care of the palace. So the king set out with all the people following him, and they halted at the edge of the city. But then we see in 2 Samuel 15 and 30, we find that David is going up the Mount of Olives. And here David, he is weeping as he went, and his head is covered and he's barefoot. Have you ever been there in your life where you you feel like you're going up your own Mount of Olives and somebody has hurt you? And now all of a sudden you're leaving wherever that is and you're weeping. But here David, his head was covered. He was barefoot, and all the people with him covered their heads too. And they were weeping as they went up. And now David had been told, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. So David prayed, O Lord, turn Ahithophel's counsel into foolishness. So here's one hurt David experienced. But now we see in 2 Samuel 16 and 1, verses 1 through 4, after David had gone a short distance beyond the summit, there was Ziba. I'm trying to paint the picture that we will understand how David felt before we get to Psalm 55. The steward of Mephibosheth, he was waiting to meet him, and he had a string of donkeys saddled and loaded with 200 loaves of bread, 100 cakes of raisin, and so on. But then in verse 3, the king asked, he said, where is your master's grandson? And Ziba said to him, he's staying in Jerusalem, because he thinks today the house of Israel will be given back, but the house of Israel will give me back my grandfather's kingdom. And then the king said to Ziba, all that belonged to Mephibosheth is yours. And somebody may be saying, well, what difference does that make what Mephibosheth did by going back? I want us to turn to 2 Samuel verse 9, verses 1 and following. David, when he was looking for someone that he could do well to, he asked the question, is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake? And now there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba. They called him to appear before David, and they said to the king, are you Ziba, your servant? He replied. The king asked, is there no one still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness? And Ziba answered the king. He said, there is still a son of Jonathan. He is crippled in both feet. But then verse 6 says, when Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. And David said, Mephibosheth, your servant, he replied. He said, don't be afraid. He said, I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father, Jonathan. The bottom line was this. Now we see David, he's leaving his home. And then we see that his trusted counselor, Ahithophel, he's already betrayed him. Now we see Mephibosheth, somebody that he had done well to. He was good to him. He allowed him to eat at his table and treated him like one of his own sons. But now we see Mephibosheth. He's also betraying King David. But then back here in 2 Samuel 16:5, as King David approached Berer, a man from the same clan as Saul's family came out from there. His name was Shimei, son of Gera, and he cursed as he came out, and he pelted David and all the king's officials with stones. David was having a really bad day. David, he went from one person betraying him and then Mephibosheth betraying him, and now he's just trying to walk and mind his own business, and he has someone coming out and cursing him and pelting him with dirt. He's went through a whole bunch. And again, it was a bad day for David. But look at here. As David is walking away from his home, all these people that he had treated so very good over all these years, and now they're treating him so badly. Can you imagine? How do you think David was feeling right about now? You think he was feeling broken? You think he was feeling hurt as he had to leave his own home and leaving his home and leaving friends that were friends, but now they're treating David in a very bad way. But here as we get ready to look in Psalm 55, we sense David's extreme anguish. We sense his heart as is hurting from the bitter blow that's come from his friends. As David begins, he's going to pour his heart out to God in this psalm, and we will discover how low and how hurt David actually was. But David begins in this psalm in verse number 1. He said, "Listen to my prayer, O God, and do not ignore my plea." And he says, "Hear me and answer me." But you know what? Too often when we hit low points in our lives, we want everyone else to listen to us and to give us counsel except God. When we hit these very low points in our lives, when we're really hurt, when we feel like we can't take no more, we will want everyone else to listen to us. We'll call our neighbors. We'll call JoJo. We'll call Ray Ray. We'll call our psychologists, our psychiatrists. We'll call all these other people, so they will listen to us and give us counsel, but often we don't call God. But when we're at these low points in our lives, we need to make certain that we are calling God. He said again, he said, "Listen to my prayer, O God. Do not ignore my plea." And he said, "Hear me." And not only hear me, but he's also saying, "Answer me." But then he says, "My thoughts, they trouble me, and I'm in distraught. And at the voice of the enemy, at the stares of the wicked, for they bring down suffering upon me and revile me in their anger." But then he said in verse 4, "My heart is in anguish within me, and the terrors of death assail me." He's saying that fear and trembling have beset me, and horror has overwhelmed me. He said, "Oh, that I had the wings of a dove. I would fly away and be at rest. I would flee far away and stay in the desert. I would hurry to my place of shelter, far from the tempest and storm." When we're hurting deeply within, often, again, we won't call on God who can help us. But when we're in these places, our heart is in anguish. Look at what David is saying again. He said, I'm in anguish. And he talks about terrors and the death assailing him. Fear and trembling has beset him, and horror has overwhelmed him. I don't know. Have you been there in your life? Have you been there in your life where someone has betrayed you and you feel just like David is feeling right now? You wish that you had wings of a dove, that you could just fly away. You desire to get away from it all. You desire to get away from the school you may be in. You don't even want to go into the school anymore. You may not want to go in your job. You may not want to go anywhere around anyone because you feel like they're your enemy as well. But David said, "I would fly away and I'd be at rest." But really, this is the wrong mindset for David to have.